Hey, let's turn our microphone on. Let's see if that helps anymore. Alright, so some weirdness happened. I'm not sure in one case what to do about it. In the other case, I fixed it. I got an email from my web hosting service. Now, this is a web hosting service that I've been with since about 1999, so I've been with them for a long time. I had my website hosted elsewhere originally. I don't even remember where I originally had it hosted back in the 90s, but back about 1999 or 2000, somewhere in there, I switched to my current web host, which is a company that was originally called Crystal Tech. I guess they're called New Tech now. It's been through a change of ownership. Anyway, I got this email from them that said, hey, Spam Assassin has blacklisted your site, and Spam Assassin says you're sending out spam advertising. Now, this is a website that I've had for, of course, a long time. In its current incarnation, it's done in WordPress, and as a WordPress website, it's been up about 10 years. So, it's been around for a bit. Before that, it was HTML, and I first put it up probably around 1996 or so. So I get this email, and I call up and try to find out what's happening, and it turns out someone apparently exploited some sort of vulnerability in PHP, got in above the public HTML folder, made some changes, put some binaries in to the folder, the etc. folder above public HTML, which is part of the website I never access because I'm not a server guy. I don't do all that kind of stuff. So, took a look at it, got online with the tech support guys, and they said, yeah, there's some binaries up there, sending out a lot of emails. Something is going on, and, well, it's got to be fixed. And the only fix they could think of was for me to delete the whole website and rebuild it. I wasn't happy about it, but I just trashed all of my content, got rid of it. I had to start from scratch. I put up a little HTML page and said, my website has been taken down. Somehow I got hacked, and the web hosting service offered, hey, we'll do a forensic examination of your website. We'll charge you $100 an hour. God only knows how long it will take. But ultimately, we'll probably find out what's wrong. We can fix it. Well, so, what am I going to do? Pay these guys $600, $800, $1,200? I mean, I could do it myself if I had the time and if I wanted to, and I didn't want to do either. I began to think, well, back in the 1990s, when I originally did the website, I had up a lot of writing that I had done for various publications, some op-ed pieces that I'd done here and there, all of my articles that I'd done for Tech Central Station back in 2003 and 2004 and 2005. A lot of political stuff, a lot of military affairs and foreign affairs stuff. I stopped writing about that stuff. It became less interesting to me as our politics became ever more divided and divisive. And it felt a lot like I was preaching to the choir, or one science fiction book I read once put it, expounding religious doctrine to the temple singers. And there's no real reason to do that. It doesn't really accomplish anything. We've kind of segregated ourselves into political ghettos on the left or right. Nobody wants to hear what the other people have to say. That doesn't bode well for the future of the country, by the way. Just thought I'd drop that in there. But anyway, that's the reality. And I decided, I want to start writing about things that I just enjoy and that other people enjoy and that we can find some common ground on. So whether it was cars or motorcycles, and it was a lot of cars and motorcycles and humor, and more recently gaming stuff. The fact is, I wanted to do something that multiple people could enjoy without having to be thrown into some political ghetto. And so I just trashed everything back in 2007 and just started from scratch. And that WordPress site has been around for a while. Now, when this happened this last week, I just thought to myself, well, a lot of the content is stale. I mean, who really wants to go back and read a review of a 2008 Suzuki SV650 motorcycle? I mean, who cares? It's really old and stale content. All of my newer stuff, my automotive and motorcycle writing, is all in my book, The Joy of Automotion, which you can obtain off of Amazon, along with my other book, Slackernomics, that I published in 2004. But I just thought, since most of the stuff is in the book, and since the rest of it is kind of stale and old, I mean, 10-year-old car and motorcycle reviews, who cares? I just decided to start from scratch. I pulled up a couple of my recent articles and saved them. I managed to do that. I mean, I just trashed everything else. So then the question was, how do I get this thing back up? How do I get it started again? I don't want to go back to plain old HTML. I sure as heck don't want to use WordPress anymore. WordPress has a couple of problems. It's a good CMS, but it's also a very popular one. About a third, 28% I think is the actual number, but close to a third of all the websites on the internet are in WordPress. That's made WordPress an enormously attractive target for hackers. And they just bang on it. It's not that WordPress itself is insecure. It's just that it's prone to things like brute force attacks. For example, the login page is one everybody knows where a standard WordPress plugin page is. So there are these bots that go out on the internet and they look in the root of your website and they look for a folder called wp-login.php, and then they immediately begin to slam it with hundreds and hundreds of logins per minute to try to brute force hack their way into the login. And even if it doesn't brute force attack, and it doesn't break your login, use really strong passwords and what have you. The fact is, in shared hosting, even if I'm going to turn people away and say, no, you can't look at this page, I still have to process the request, and it still takes up server resources, and it still uses up all of my server resource allotment. And so, even if they don't get into my site, even if they don't take it down, the fact remains that they can still do a denial of service so that nobody else can get to it, because the site has to be shut down simply because people are banging on it so hard. I have another WordPress site that I actually can't take down, and that actually required a lot of work to secure over the course of like 3 or 4 months to ensure that hackers couldn't get to it. And I managed to do that, and it looks like it's fairly stable. I didn't put in that same amount of effort on my own website. After all, it's just a vanity website. It doesn't make me any money. So why spend all of that extra time on a website that I'm the only one that messes with? And who cares about it? Who wants to get to it anyway? I guess I was wrong. Somebody did want to get to it. They found a vulnerability. They exploited it. And I lost the site. And that's a big problem with WordPress. The fact that its architecture is so well known that people can go in, find it, start hammering on it. There's just not much you can do. You can use the WP login page to something else so that they don't get to that page. You can secure the site with a file that's called an htaccess file that allows you to do some site security. There are some things that you can do, but it's tedious and time consuming. You have to have a plug-in called WordFence, and you also have to be very, very careful because WordPress doesn't do a very good job of vetting plugins. So when you put in a plugin, you could be throwing in a vulnerability that you don't even know about simply because it's part of the plugin and there's an exploit that hasn't been plugged. And WordPress does a pretty bad job at vetting those plugins to be sure that they're secure. So yeah, there's a great amount of support in the WordPress community. There's a huge number of plugins available, but it's not perfect, and it's so well known. There are so many vulnerabilities in PHP that are well known that when they ultimately get plugged, they open up these windows of vulnerability. So goodbye WordPress. So then I had to find out, what do I pick? I had to search and find something that I could pick to replace WordPress, because I didn't want to use WordPress and go through another repeat of what I've been through with other WordPress websites. So I found this new flat file CMS called Grav. And by new, I mean really new. It just came out of beta last year. So for public release, it's basically 6 months, 7 months old. Well, I guess this is what, September 9? So, okay, so that's 10 months old at this point. In any event, less than a year old, a new system. And uses a lot of new technology. Uses Twig for templating. It uses Markdown to do the writing instead of having a WYSIWYG editor. And it's been an interesting experience. I wrote an article. I have it on my website at dalefranks.com. It's Goodbye WordPress, Grav, if you want to read it, which gets into a little more of the technical details about how that works. But anyway, I had to get rid of my site, and I've started over from scratch with my website. So we'll see how that works. I have noticed one thing, though, that because the website is marked down, and also because it's new and I'm kind of curious as to how all this stuff works, it has made me want to write a little bit more. And over the last 6 or 7 months, I've been kind of dilatory about writing anything on the website. I think that may change, and I may find more things to write about. So we'll see how that works. But Grav is an interesting CMS. It's an interesting it doesn't have a database, and that's the other thing that really attracted me to it. I was thinking, I don't have a big enough site, and I don't write enough to really worry about having 10, 20,000 pages on my website. So do I really need the robustness of having a database backend or content management system? Can I get away with some sort of flat file system so I don't have to do the database thing? Because here's the other thing about WordPress. Anytime somebody goes to a page, anywhere on your website, well, the content that's on that page actually resides in a SQL database, a MySQL database. So every time somebody hits a page, in addition to the server having to create the page via PHP and serve it out HTML on the browser, it actually has to go up to the server and pull all of the content off of the server and organize that. So every time somebody goes to a page, I've got to do, in addition to building a page, I've got to do a round trip back to a database server to pull the data, and that adds more time. I've noticed that websites just seem to be getting slower and slower. WordPress is also difficult to fully understand because it has millions of lines at this point, which have been added by literally hundreds, perhaps thousands of people. And so it's not easy, even as a developer, to figure out how to do things, how to change things, how to customize things, simply because it's impossible for one person anymore to know how code makes WordPress work. Grav is much smaller, much more lightweight. It's a flat file system. It saves all of your posts and content that you do in files that are just text files. They're called markdown files. And it just pulls those markdown files and it converts them to HTML and just shoves them out to people. It doesn't have to do that database. I think I'm going to be a lot happier with it. I've been very happy with it so far. You have to be a little more technical to run a Grav website. If you're a web developer, it's probably pretty easy for you. If you are just Joe Blow who thinks that boldface means you hit the B button in Microsoft Word, it may not be the content management system for you. Although, if you know HTML and CSS, so even if you're not a developer, you just have some basic HTML and CSS knowledge, and you're willing to invest some time to learn the Twig templating format, YAML, which is a very, very simple syntax. I don't know what to call it. It's not really a programming language. It's really a way of storing in files a whole bunch of properties for your website that you can call in HTML so that you can just edit the text files. Everything is text-based. That's the point. So Twig, text-based templates. YAML, text-based configuration properties. And the CSS is all done in SCSS, SAS. So all of the different styles are sort of broken out into these tiny little pieces, and you edit one of those pieces, and you have I got one called Scout app that just whenever you save one of the SCSS files, it automatically compiles your CSS so that you can upload the compiled CSS files. So it's an interesting system. I'm getting used to it. I like what I've seen of it so far, and it actually makes me want to write stuff. It actually makes me want to go in there and do things, because the writing process is a lot simpler, and I like it. The other thing that you can do if you're really, really a geek is you can replicate your website with it to Git, because they have a round trip feature so that you can round trip edit back through Git. So you can be anywhere in the world as long as you can get to github.com. You can actually edit, or other people. So multiple people can go in and edit documents on your website via Git. Again, happy to be a Markdown. Markdown is a very simple language, but it does have a bit of a learning curve if you're not a developer. Fortunately, like I said, it's really simple. There's some drawbacks to Grav. It doesn't have a spell checker built into the Markdown editor, so it's not very good to type in directly into the editor that's built into the admin console. It's a lot better if you use something like Stack Edit, which does incorporate browser spell checking, so that you can write it in Stack Edit and then copy and paste it into Grav, which is a bit of an addition to the workflow that I don't like. It seemed to me that if Stack Edit can do browser-based spell checking, why can't Grav do it with the editor they use? I'm not entirely sure about that. That's certainly something that should be addressed. It's not as easy as WordPress, so there are some things that are more difficult. I don't like that. On the other hand, I am a web developer and have been for 20 years, so none of it is insurmountable. It's just not as easy and user-friendly out of the box as WordPress. Having said that, in 2003 and 2004, WordPress wasn't super freaking easy either. So it's matured a lot, and I guess I'm getting to the beginning of Grav and the beginning of that process maturation. We'll see how that works over time. The other thing I noticed that was a little more troubling is this thing with Google. Now, I'm not sure what Google is doing. I'm not sure how they make these decisions, but I noticed a couple of my videos are not liable for full monetization. Now, look, I don't make a lot of money off of this. I make hardly any money off of this, quite frankly. We're talking pennies, not dollars, and certainly not hundreds or thousands. But why are my videos, including one I just took at Comic Con, why are they not suitable for monetization? Is it because I occasionally say bad words? I see a lot of guys like the Dishonored Wolf or whoever who actually do say lots of bad words, and it looks like their videos are monetized. Maybe I'm wrong, but fewer or no ads is what it says. And there has been this thing about Google apparently sort of shadow banning people that they think are conservative, or at least who take a different line culturally than the social justice warriors. That's a little bit disturbing. And I'm wondering if I'm getting caught up in that simply because I kind of scoff at political correctness, just as a matter of course. Partially for political reasons, partially because I despise being told what to do by anybody. And political correctness is just saying, you have to think what I think, or you're a bad person. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. But I've noticed that I am losing this monetization on some of my videos, and I don't know why. So that's something I'll certainly be watching, because it is concerning to me. Not because I particularly care whether I'm money, because I frankly don't. But Google is in an odd position. It's a monopoly position. Let's face it, if you really want to do something via video, streaming like this, I mean, I guess you could go to Vimeo. I guess there's a couple of alternatives. But YouTube is the 800-pound gorilla in that arena. It's the one place to go where you know you have a wide audience, and you know you have the technology and the support and the APIs that you need to get your content out there. Just like it has a monopoly on search. I mean, people don't say, would you like me to Bing that for you? Google has a lot of power, and it bothers me if any company starts to use that power, especially a monopoly company, starts to use that power to to promote a particular political point of view and to subordinate or censor other points of view. Seems to me if you're going to be a monopoly provider, and Google I think, could be argued is a monopoly provider, then I think you have to be very careful about those kind of things unless you want to invite federal regulation and you want to be forced to be rather less censorious. The censoriousness of modern society is bothersome anyway. There are certain ideas that if you express them now, you are a horrible human being. Even gone so far as to say, oh, you voted for Donald Trump or you're a Republican, you must be a racist. That's a really, really bad position for society to get into. And it's the kind of thing you say when government and politics becomes a religion rather than some simple ideas about what government should or shouldn't do. Your politics don't make you a good or a bad person. The things you believe the government should or shouldn't do make you a good or bad person. What makes you a good or bad person is how you treat other human beings. And if you believe all of the right things politically that the SJWs want you to believe, and you still treat your fellow human beings like crap, then you're a horrible human being, irrespective of what you believe politically. And we used to have that in this country, where, okay, you believe X politically, you're wrong. And that has morphed into, you believe X politically, you must be evil. Look, if I believe the federal government should be smaller, spend less money, that more power should be devolved to the states, and that the federal government should be responsible primarily for talking to heathen foreigners, and if that fails, killing them, and leaving everything else up to the states, that's not a moral position. That is a position about what I think the proper scope of a federal government is in a federal republic. And that power should be devolved to the lowest level possible to be as close to the citizens as possible, not hoarded in the federal government so that 536 guys sitting in a capital 3,000 miles away from me can run the lives of 320 million human beings. Maybe we have too large of a country and too populous a country for all of the important decisions to be made in Washington, D.C. One of the reasons why there is so much hyper-partisanship in our politics now is because what the federal government does is important. But as difficult as it might be for you to believe, for most Americans who lived in this country prior to 1960, the federal government wasn't all that important. Yes, it was important when the Japanese start bombing our ships in Pearl Harbor, and it's important when the Nazis start rolling across Europe, but in the normal times, most people had no contact with or concern about the federal government at all, and that has changed. All the big decisions are now mandated by Washington, D.C., and because what happens in Washington, D.C. is so important, our national politics have become very, very vitriolic. If we had less power in Washington and more power at the individual states, hey, if people wanted to thump the Bible and worship baby Jesus in Alabama, who cares? Let them do it. And if the communists in Massachusetts wanted to have the People's Republic of Massachusetts and have single-payer health care and public ownership of all goods and production, who cares? Let them do it. Because we can always go to another state that has a government that's more to our liking. The laboratory of democracy. All 50 states in a federal system should be little laboratories of democracy and should stand or fail based on their policies. While the federal government should handle big things. Oh, we need an interstate highway system. Oh, we need to have an air traffic control system. Oh, we need to have a Department of State to talk to heathen foreigners. That is how power should be sort of split up. And the federal government should only be in charge of things that have national implications. Everything else we can do ourselves. We just don't need a federal government that is this big and this overbearing, that spends, by the way, $4 trillion a year, a trillion of which we don't have and borrow every year, that can't go on forever. Yet we're acting as if nothing will ever change. The experience of Greece over the past couple of years seems not to have made any impression on Washington, D.C. Got bad news for you folks. We can't spend the amount of money we've been spending. We certainly can't increase the amount of money we've been spending without a massive overhaul of our tax system and making your taxes higher. You know what the average person pays in, say, the Netherlands to the government of their income? I mean, the average person who makes $40,000 a year, married, lives in a two-bedroom apartment, maybe about 40% of their income to the government. I mean, it gets extracted right from the beginning. I remember when I was in Europe, stationed there, and I was a staff sergeant at the time in the military police, and at the military police, it was headquarters Allied for Europe at the time. I was talking to one of the Dutch guys that I worked with, one of the Dutch policemen. I was a security policeman in the Air Force. This guy was a Dutch national policeman. Their actual name of their agency is the Koninklijke Marechaussee. And this Marechaussee corporal I was with made about the same amount of money that I made every month. The difference was he took home half of it. And I took home a lot more because I was an American and I didn't get taxed the way he got taxed. A lot of people in this country are pretty lightly touched with income tax. They pay maybe, 5, 10% all is said and done. Well, if you want to spend the money that the federal government has been spending and you want to keep spending or even increase it, you're going to need to give 40% of your cash to the government right from the source. And that's how the Dutch do it. It's really easy to do a tax return in the Netherlands. How much money did you make? Send me 40% of it. Okay, it's a postcard-sized tax return. Yeah, postcard-sized tax return sounds nice until you realize you can half your money to the government. That's a system you want here, and it's a system we can certainly have, but you need to be prepared to pony up that money to do so. So anyway, that's politics. I'm not into politics, but this Google thing really has me wondering about some stuff, and it has me wondering about how Google is handling political opinion, and I think we have to get the answer not well. This James Damore guy that got fired at Google simply for questioning the received wisdom about diversity in males and females. Well, he certainly put himself in a bad position. The company got rid of him. The company believes some things, and it's kind of interesting. I was watching Silicon Valley, and one character in Silicon Valley said something about religion, and J.T. Miller, who plays Bachman, said to the guy, first of all, Christianity is illegal in Northern California. Yeah, haha, funny, but also kind of true. And that's just not good. We have to allow people to believe things. And people should be allowed to believe whatever it is that they want to believe. What we don't want people to do, and what we can certainly stop people from doing, is we can stop them from hurting each other. So we can stop people from killing each other or at least, if not stop them, punish them for killing each other or hitting each other or stealing each other's stuff. If we get into the business of treating people badly because we don't like what they think, irrespective of their actions, then I think we're getting awfully close to the George Orwell thought police deal. Got to remember, 1984 was a warning, not a how-to book. So, stuff coming up. Nothing much this month is coming up as far as games, but I am waiting for a couple of things. I went through the little playable demo that they had for Wolfenstein 3D, which is like basically 5 minutes of stuff of the very first level of the game. It looks pretty cool. The whole Wolfenstein thing, I think, is hopefully going to be pretty big. So I'm looking really to that. Assassin's Creed, a little less excited about that. I know a lot of people love the Assassin's Creed pirate deal. That was just not all that interesting to me, so I never actually finished that game. I got awfully tired of hearing these people sing sea shanties at me for hours on end, so I dumped that. But Assassin's Creed Origins is coming out, and I'm going to have to give that a try. The other thing that's coming out is Call of Duty World War II. That I do want to play, and it looks really, really good, and I'm glad they're getting back to World War II. Rather than try to do what they did in the last game and take us into the far future so that we could shoot at the Martian rebels. That was an awfully short single-player campaign, and it just wasn't all that good. So I'm hoping Call of Duty World War II takes us back to the things that made that franchise enjoyable back in the day. I did notice one thing looking over the multiplayer stuff that I've seen. There's a lot of videos out of people playing multiplayer. You want to talk about diversity. I saw a guy with a video of a black woman German soldier playing in the multiplayer, which is a little bit jarring, but it's certainly inclusive. I guess you have to say that. I think it's rather ahistorical. I'm fairly certain that there were no black women in combat in the German army from 1939 to 1945. But, you know, it's a video game. There's a limit to how much historical accuracy we actually have to have. I mean, look at Battlefield 1. Battlefield 1, everybody's running around with submachine guns and light machine guns and lighting everybody up in full auto. Nobody had those weapons in World War I. There were maybe, a couple of hundred guys that had a semi-automatic rifle. Everybody else was carrying a bolt-action Mauser K98 or British Lee Enfield SMLE. And there's not a lot of people in Battlefield 1 running around with bolt-action rifles because nobody likes them, because bolt-action rifles suck in video games. So Battlefield 1 is pretty ahistorical when it comes to World War I, and I don't much care. So we'll look at Call of Duty World War II, and if I'm playing in the multiplayer and you are playing as a German woman, or a black German woman in the multiplayer, then I will say howdy. And if you're on the opposite side, I can shoot you just as I would any other Nazi. Red Dead Redemption. Now that I'm really looking forward to. So I'm going to be very happy to see Red Dead Redemption. I love the original game. I loved the free roam multiplayer. Loved everything about it. In fact, I am playing free roam multiplayer in GTA 5 now. And I just sort of mess around with it. I don't really want to have a business, and I don't really want to concentrate on making a whole bunch of money. What I want to do is just drive cars around and shoot at things and occasionally shoot at other players and play on the challenges. But they had this one motorcycle that I really, really wanted. And, I promised myself, I did everything I could to resist the idea of buying a shark card. I said, you know what? I paid money for this game. I'm not going to give any more money. I paid my $60, and I'm going to keep playing. And I said, if I really want this bike, and it's the jet bike that has the wings so you can kind of fly around on it. And I thought, if I'm going to get that, I'll just make the money. And it's $3.5 million, and I'll just make it. And I've been kind of grinding away at it, trying to make the money. And then it occurred to me, I'm not a big fan of microtransactions. Not a big fan of the way that they do that. They tend to err on the side of pay to win inside of games, and I really, really dislike that. I can see play to win faster. I think Warframe has a sort of a play to win faster mentality, but you can play without actually giving them money, and if you're willing to do the grind, you can get all the cool stuff eventually. But I started to think about, and of course this is nothing more than self-justification. I started to think, well, I paid $60 for this game back in 2013. I've been playing this game for 4 years without giving them a dime more than I've paid. And in the interim, they've given us the new DLC Smugglers Run DLC. They've given us the Motorcycle DLC, the CEO DLC for multiplayer. They've given us all of this content, and I haven't given them a dime. And I'm not entirely sure that that's fair, because they're spending a lot of money giving me content. So maybe they deserve something from me. And by thinking that, I justified buying a $50 shark card so that I could buy the jet motorbike and drive it around. And once I'd done it and I got the jet motorbike and started driving around, I was instantly disappointed by how sucky it was. So they got my $50. But speaking of that, Destiny 2. Destiny 2 is coming out. I haven't gotten it yet. The reason I haven't gotten it yet is because Destiny 1 was so disappointing. So I'm not sure that I really want to get back into it with Destiny 2. And some of the things I've seen about it makes it seem kind of play to win. They really do want that extra money off of you. I think I would prefer an economy where we paid a lot more of that money up front. Because when you think about it, the cost of a AAA game has been $60 for about a decade now. Now, certainly everything else has gotten more expensive in the last decade. That $60 doesn't go as far as it used to. And there's been a lot of resistance among players for giving the publishers, more than $60 for a AAA game. And they try to get around that with, first day releases and give you some extras, a collector's edition and what have you, so that you pay more. But I'm beginning to think that maybe $60 just isn't fair for us as a consumer community and gaming community to ask for. Maybe if we had more money up front, and we're willing to pay a little more money up front, it might reduce some of the pressure that the game publishers feel for throwing in things like microtransactions and pay-to-win models, and give us a little extra content for the money that we're giving them up front. I'm not entirely sure that's true, because I think microtransactions are probably pretty profitable. I know it probably has been for GTA 5, because I see all these 12-year-old kids who are running around with all the full CEO stuff and the bunker stuff, and I'm thinking, well, unless this kid is not going to school and he's grinding 24 hours a day, that kid's probably using shark cards. And I think that that's a big issue, because you have people who really can't afford the shark cards, and they kind of feel like they're second-class citizens, while, Joe Blow level 20 newbie can just go in there and say, yeah, I'll give you $100 and get, $8 million in shark card stuff, and I'll just buy my bunker, and I'll just buy my armored ATV with the machine guns, and the rest of you can just suck it, and I'll have all the cool stuff, even though I've just started playing. And so maybe there needs to be some second look by both the publishers and the gaming community about how we can work together with this stuff. Maybe if we're willing to pay them a little more up front, they will be somewhat less interested in forcing us to try to give them money or become second-class citizens over time. Having said that, microtransactions probably make them a lot of money, and the economics of game design and release have gotten really tough for publishers, which I think a lot of players don't really recognize, because the traditional model of the game prior to microtransactions and all this other stuff was, okay, I'm going to spend, let's see, what did Rockstar spend on GTA 5 or Red Dead? I'm sure it was somewhere in the $60 to $100-ish million range over the course of 4 or 5 years for the game. So you're putting in a lot of money, and we're talking tens of millions of dollars. Even for a big company, that's a lot of money. For a moderately sized or modestly sized developer like Rockstar, that's still a lot of money. And what you get is you spend 5 years spending $60, $80, $100 million on developing a game. You release it, and for the first year you make a lot of money, and then you make nothing else. And traditionally you have this tail, but what you get is this graph that sort of goes up really high at the beginning and then just tumbles off, and then there's this tail that kind of follows along, and it's at a much lower level. And I think microtransactions bring that tail up to here from here, and so that allows them to have ongoing development efforts without having to say, okay, I'm going to sell this game. I hope I make $500 million of it, because I'm going to have to use that $500 million for the next 5 years to publish my next video game, and no more inventory is, or no more revenue is going to come in. Microtransactions ease that by making that tail a little thicker to give them an ongoing stream of revenue. So I don't think we're going to get them away from it completely in terms of microtransactions and ongoing DLCs. But ultimately, I don't think $60 is the right price for a game now. It was the right price 10 years ago. I think now the right price probably closer to 90 or $100 for that same game and that same amount of content. Anyway, that's how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong, but if I am, I'm sure some of you guys will tell me that in contents. That's all I do tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks for listening, and I'll look forward to speaking with you guys again in the near future. Until then, so long, guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.